an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, Season 2-ish, episodes 75, 76, and 77. 3 episodes this time. In these episodes, we get to see Mr. 3 sort of defeated. He's going to get his comeuppance from one of his own people later, as it turns out. And also, it turns out that Sanji doesn't save them, which genuinely surprised me. He's got his whole other thing that he's doing. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Bernadette for commissioning this episode. What's up, Bernadette? Bernadette is in the chat. I am so hyped. Been playing Animal Crossing nonstop. Yeah, they released the episode, do you hear me? The update early. I didn't know that. I just found out today that it was out yesterday. And it's probably a good thing I didn't know, because I would have gotten fucking nothing done yesterday. But I cannot wait to just go to town. And Gus is here. Hi, Gus. All right, so these 3 episodes, they are very eventful. Also, I've noticed because of the way it's set up on Netflix that this is the end of this season. So we are going to be moving into a new, major arc, evidently, which is exciting. And it makes sense. This ended in a really epic way, and that, I didn't realize as I was watching it that it was meant to be sort of a season ender, but it definitely serves as one. I think that the tone of it and the way everything goes makes complete sense. So, oh God, where to start, guys? Because there are a couple of different plot points going on, and I'm gonna start with my favorite. It's hard to say what that even is, but I'm going to talk about Sanji's thing first, because Sanji hasn't been talked about for a couple episodes. He's just been, out of the main conflict. And because of that, of course, I expected him to turn up and be the answer. This is often what happens, is that especially TV, books will do this too, but I feel like TV leans on this a little bit more. They will have an ensemble cast, and you'll be so distracted by whatever is going on screen that you forget to ask where somebody is, and then all of a sudden they just pop up and completely save the day, or they're the game changer in some other way. So I 100% figured that was what Sanji was going to be. And he does kind of wind up saving them in another way, because otherwise they would have had to wait for a year for their blog post to update, which is fucking bananas. But it wasn't in the way that I thought it would be. So he is wondering where everybody is. And there's a great bit where he's walking through the woods, and he's just calling out to Vivi and Nami and just saying, "Where are you? I love you." And later on, he sees them, and he's just there's a bit of a creeper moment because of course, Nami's shirt has been burned away, but he then quickly gives her his jacket. And I was like, good for you, buddy. You're trying to rein in some of your creepiness. And I really do appreciate that. But yeah, he uses his head here, and he's like, this doesn't seem right. People should have been back by now. Clearly something's going on. And so he gets off the ship, and he's going into the woods again to try and find them. And he comes across a house made of wax, this little, it's more like a shed, and it has a tea table in there, and apparently it comes with tea. There's Earl Grey. Again, I was drinking Earl Grey while watching, and I did a little cheers. And it's such a weird bit, because he's drinking Earl Grey, but then it's almost like he got so caught up in finding this little like piece of a haven that he loses track of what he was doing. And I thought at first that when we see what happens with Luffy and the way that he gets trapped by the color trap, I thought maybe they have something like that, like painted on this house to sort of distract Sanji. Similar, like as Luffy gets distracted with the green one and he's just sitting there saying how nice this tea is. And I really thought, okay, that is probably like, this is maybe meant to be a decoy to distract somebody. And it turns out, no, that's not it at all. Sanji literally is just that into it when he comes across a place that has like a nice pot of tea. To his credit, he finally stops and is like, what the fuck? What am I doing? I'm just sitting here drinking tea. This is not the time for this. And I was like, thank you. Yeah, no, it's really not. I'm mystified right now. What are you doing here? And Bernadette says, I really like Sanji because even though he is so ridiculous sometimes, he is also very smart in a way the others aren't. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's so sort of fun about the way that these characters are written, is that they each have their own ridiculousness, their own brand of like, wow, really? But they all each also bring something very specific to the table. And I mean that more than just like their abilities as fighters and whatever. They all just think of things very, very differently. And I'm just always on Nami's side, as it turns out, with everything. It's just, you know, other than when she gets super greedy. And honestly, even then, I'm not like that mad at her. But yeah, the approach that they each have makes sense because they were all raised in completely different ways and have extremely different priorities. So Sanji is sitting there and he is drinking this tea, and he is like I said, has this moment of realizing like, what the fuck am I doing? I shouldn't be just sitting here. And then he notices a snail transponder. There's a lot of weirdness in this little side quest that he's on. But the snail transponder, I gotta say that for me is probably why is it that with this like universe, so many communication devices are animal based? It's really weird. I don't understand how that's supposed to work. Like, it feels so Flintstones to me. You know what I mean? But it also, like the Flintstones, there's an aspect of that just feels like magic. You know, this is why they had the Jetsons and the Flintstones meet. Because despite the fact that the Jetsons are technically supposed to be, you know, thousands of years into the future, it really feels like the Flintstones have it figured out almost as well as the Jetsons do, all things considered. And is it supposed to be magic? Is it supposed to be technology? Because like, have we seen a snail transponder before? We saw a transponder at one point. I think it was with the like rat-faced guy when we were in Nami's storyline. I can't remember if it was a snail or not. I remember being distracted by it then as well, because I was just kind of like, what? Why? What? But it doesn't actually matter when you come down to it. It's just a really weird, the way that this is like alive, and it still has buttons on the side. So it's unclear to me exactly what this is even. Is it meant to be a creature with consciousness that's choosing to send the message for you? Or is it supposed to be like an inanimate object that is made to look like this animal? I don't understand. And this snail, I should also add, has a mustache. I swear to God, you guys, if you just cut together some of the sentences from my coverage of this show, it would sound like I was having a fucking stroke. It's he comes across a house made of wax and the snail has a mustache. Like, okay, Grandma, go take your pills. Oh, Christ's sake. But anyway, so he gets a call on it and he picks up and says, "Hey, you've called the damn restaurant," which I'm just like, all right. I mean, that's a way to answer the phone, I guess. And it turns out it's Mr. Zero, and he is calling for a report from Mr. 3 about how the mission has gone. Now, for the record, Sanji does not imitate Mr. 3 because he has never met Mr. 3. He sounds nothing like Mr. 3. And Mr. Zero does not notice. He just simply does not seem to care. Like, I don't know if he doesn't know Mr. 3 that well, but there's like a sense of him being in charge enough and like hands-on enough with his like top tier people that he really should know what Mr. 3 sounds like. But whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. It works out in our favor. So he fakes it. He understands, like, you know, what's going on here, what the check-in is for, and reports that the Straw Hat and all of his people are dead, and, you know, assures Mr. Zero that it's all taken care of. And Mr. Zero is like, all right, well, I'm going to send the Unluckies with an eternal pose, I think is what he says. And it turns out that's the name for the otter. And I keep saying pelican, but it's a vulture. I keep wanting to say pelican because it seems like an ocean creature. And a vulture and an otter don't seem like they go together. A pelican and an otter I can understand. But I don't know why I'm trying to apply any logic to any of this. Because why would a snail be a communications... like, if you were going... guys, just theoretically. Let's say you were writing this show and you had to come up with an animal that was going to represent a phone or, you know, a radio. What would you pick? I'm going to go with turtle. Now, I'm realizing as I say this that a lot of the reason why I'm going with turtle is because of the shell. And a snail also has a shell. So maybe that's not that crazy. The shell just makes it feel a little bit like you could have something installed on it and it wouldn't hurt the little, like, dude inside, you know? Maybe that's the theory with the snail also. But anyway, let's see. Gus says, we've seen one before at the end of Arlong Park. It was a snail. We also saw a snail fax machine. Ooh, I don't remember that, Gus. That's... Where does the paper come out? Of the shell? Or what? Like, I don't know why I'm asking these questions. Like, why am I asking these questions? Bernadette says, welcome to the insanity that is One Piece. Snails have mustaches, boogers are explosive, houses are from wax. Indeed. Gus says it's actually based off a real-life fake invention that someone tried to sell back in the day. Some scientists theorized that mating pairs of slugs made a psychic link between them and tried to make a telegraph out of it. Gus, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that information. Oh my God. That is so funny. I don't know why that gets me so bad. Why did they think mating slugs had a psychic link? Like, I am dying to know what brought this person to this conclusion in the first place. What, like, oh my God. Okay. All right. I love that then. That there is an actual, like, reasoning behind choosing these. Because otherwise it just sort of felt arbitrary. But the fact that this was a thing somewhere, all right, you know, that's good enough for me. So yeah, these two land in the window of the wax house. They see Sanji And evidently they know who is on their team and who is not. And they see Sanji and they were like, I don't think so, friend. And they attack him. And evidently, this is not the kind of thing where if you have like a radio, you press the button, you can talk, you let go, you can listen. Evidently, letting go of it, Mr. Zero can still hear everything. So he hears Sanji fighting these two off. They are not dead, I don't think, by the end of this. I think they're just like knocked out. There's a whole other thing where somebody, it turns out, was just knocked out. But when Sanji gets back on the phone, he tries to pass it off as, oh, hey, sorry about that. I thought Straw Hat was dead, but it turns out he wasn't. He's tougher than you think. Now, personally, were I in Sanji's position trying to, like, invent a story to cover here, I would probably say almost the exact same thing. I thought I got him, but I didn't. But now he's good and dead, you know? That would just be the first thing to think when you're, kind of being put on the spot here and you have to think on your feet. But that doesn't work well for him. And in the end, it's not about him. It doesn't work well for Mr. 3. We'll see how that winds up going for him. But in the short term, it looks like Mr. 3 is in some big trouble because Mr. 0 is like, well, you said he was dead. And Sanji's like, well, I thought he was, but it turns out he wasn't. And Mr. 0 says, so the report you gave me was a lie. And Sanji doesn't even try to defend himself, which why would you? Because there's no consequences to, having a bad relationship with this guy. He doesn't know who you are. So Sanji just goes, I mean, yeah, I guess if you want to put it like that, which once I stopped and realized everything he does that he fucks up, it looks like Mr. 3 is fucking up. So this is actually great. I found this super funny. And Mr. 0, I thought he was going to flip out on him on the phone. But instead, he just acts like, all right, well, we're going to carry through with the plan and I'll send you the log and, you'll be able to get out of there. And then as soon as he gets off the phone, he turns to, what's her face? Is it Miss Sunday? I feel like it was Miss Sunday. Is that right, guys? And he tells her to basically collect Mr. 3 on his way and kill him. I don't think he says anything about what to do with Miss Valentine or Mr. 5. Maybe he does. I don't recall because I was a little distracted at the fact that he just orders the assassination of Mr. 3. So that means that Mr. 4 is going to get a promotion. Who is Mr. 4? Have we met Mr. 4 yet? Gus says, a normal fax machine was hooked into the snail. The sending snail looked at Luffy's picture and the receiving snail got it and the fax machine printed it out. Okay. All right. Ms. All Sunday. That's a weird one. All Sunday. Okay. Oh, this reminds me. I have Unsober coming on Saturday and I need to make an event and I'm going to cover holidays. I have to do that considering the last episode. So he hangs up thinking that he pulled this off, which he basically did. And then he sees the eternal log pose on the ground, which thankfully didn't break because how tragic would that have been? And later on, when he meets up with the rest of the crew again and they realize what he's got, they are just overjoyed, cheering, and Nami especially is just oh my god, you saved us, and he's so happy to have made Nami happy. It's wonderful. Bernadette in the chat, have we met Mr. 4? I don't know. All right, keep your secrets. So that's pretty much it for what Sanji's up to during this. It takes a while to get through all of this, too. This almost all happens in the second episode of the 3 that I'm covering today. So, all right, now let's back up and we will talk about what's going on with the rest of the crew who they are hoping to be saved by Luffy. And it turns out Luffy isn't, like, it's not like Luffy doesn't do anything. Luffy's doing his best. But he gets caught up a lot better than he has been in the past. And when I say better, I mean that I feel like the weapons being used against him in this episode seem better suited to fucking him up in particular. There have been times where he has been good and well sidelined, don't get me wrong. Being locked in a cage or dropped in the ocean or whatever, those have definitely effectively taken him out of play. And that was all they were meant to do, so that wound up being successful. But his abilities in a lot of those cases wound up helping him, or he was able to do things from within those spaces anyway, because of his stretchiness. You know, they were able to pull his head out of the water so that he could breathe, or he was able to like reach out and stretch from inside the what do you call it, cage, and grab things. It's kind of funny though, because I remember when he was with Buggy the Clown and he was in that cage, he tries to reach some food and he can't quite reach, but we see his arm can stretch for like what looks like a full mile. So I call some bullshit on the fact that he couldn't reach that turkey leg or whatever the fuck he was reaching for. But yeah, there's always been like sort of a way around it, because the barriers that he's always been under have been physical barriers. And he is a physical character, so he can get around that. What he's up against this time, it's first of all the wax material, which is something that he's not super familiar with. And he does manage to play this to his advantage pretty damn well initially, but misjudges what he should do with it. So he gets his feet like locked up in a huge chunk of wax that, as he says it, it's like he's got a mallet now. And I love this, that he looks at it and he's like kind of excited by it because he can immediately see the possibilities of what's happening here. Mr. 3, for his part, feels like, aha, I really got you, and doesn't understand what Luffy's about to do. So Luffy, with his feet locked together in this wax, he jumps up, wraps his arm around the horn on the giant's helmet, and whips himself around in circles until he's basically built up this like centrifugal force, and then bashes his feet into the pole that's holding up the pumpkin part of the candle arrangement thing. And initially, everybody's like, oh shit, he did it. That's cool. But it doesn't actually change anything. The pumpkin just drops onto a new tier, and it turns out that what has happened is his destruction of this is just speeding it up. And everybody's kind of mad at him because he doesn't understand that they can't move. So he broke the pillar, which is what he like thought they wanted, and it doesn't do what he thought it should do. And he's just very confused because Luffy is just a sweet baby who just does not know. Oh God. So they're in a pickle. I fucking love Zoro is holding his sword above his head, and Nami is like, what are you doing? And he says, well, if we're gonna get frozen, I prefer this pose. I fucking died. I love the fact that there are 2 women characters up there, and they did not have the women be the vain ones who are worried about how they're being posed, because I feel like a lot of people would have gone that route. Instead, they're having it be him and his like weird vanity. And also there's a sort of like fatalistic attitude where he's just like, well, we're going to be made into wax figures, so what can you do? And I don't know. I thought that was so funny. Gus says, I think it has to do with how much he can move. Like to stretch far, he needs an arm room to be able to wind up and propel his arm. Okay. I'm willing to accept that. I'm not sure if I totally believe it, but it's a good enough explanation that it'll stay my disbelief. So, as you know, this does not work. And he is like figuring out how to use the wax against Mr. 3. But it's not going, like, everything he tries to do is actually not helping. Off to the side, Sanji uses like one of those explosive shots that he has. What are they called, guys? And he is dead on to nail Mr. 3. I genuinely was like, oh shit. Look at this. Or I said Sanji. Sorry, Usopp. But I thought, like, Usopp's really about to do something here. No. Fucking Mr. 5 jumps in front of Mr. 3. And for a second, I was like, is he just kind of taking a bullet for this guy? I didn't think he liked him. And it turns out, no, it's just that explosions don't affect him. So he just swallows it. Which I didn't realize that his ability made him impervious to all explosions. I thought his ability made it so that he couldn't be harmed by his own explosions, which is very different. But it turns out he has immunity to that kind of attack, which is I upgraded his ability in my head a little bit with that, because I was not that impressed with it, you know. And also later on, because, you know, I've been talking about how just like what else could you use as a weapon if it's your actual body that has to like form these little bombs. And I could see chewing your nails off and like flicking your fingernails or something. But he has breath bombs, which that's a good idea. You know, I think that's kind of cool. The only thing about it, and this is what's sort of like at the heart of a lot of the way that this goes with different villains. Even though his ability does seem cool, it also doesn't seem to do the kind of damage consistently that it did before. So Usopp gets nailed with one explosion after another by Mr. 5 in the same way that like Luffy was. And they're both fine. Like, do they get knocked down for a little while? Are they like dazed and hurt? Yeah. But they're not taken out of play for any particular length of time. It's like almost nothing. So that also causes me to sort of downgrade Mr. 5. What's going on with Mr. 3? It's orchestrated to take a long time because he's a fucking lunatic. So the fact that he doesn't kill people right away, that doesn't feel like it's a flaw of his power. It feels like that is by design, you know? But Mr. 5, it's like occasionally it'll be a bomb that completely levels something. Or it'll be a bomb that just like makes somebody stumble for a second and then they pick themselves back up and they just keep going and it's no issue at all. So anyway, Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine have both been assigned to handle Usopp because basically Mr. 3 is like, you all got your chance to take Luffy down and here he fucking is, alive and well. So obviously you can't handle that job. So I will do it and you go run along and take care of his shitty friend. And they are super, super salty about it. But honestly, he has a point. I mean, you know, like the evidence speaks for itself, kids. And also Mr. 5 had an opportunity to like blow him up on this island. It's not just like the previous time that they met. He had like Luffy was literally pinned in place and defenseless. And he still didn't manage to kill him. So, you know, yeah, that's fair. And again, with like the weapons that are really good against Luffy, he is running to help his friends. He has like a couple of moments where it looks like he is going to best Mr. 3. And his friends are yelling at him, just like, destroy this whole candle set. Like, it's not just that one pillar. Mr. 3 is yelling, I won't let you interfere. And he does a wax harpoon. This is when Usopp jumps in and he gets interrupted by Mr. 5. And Mr. 3 gives Luffy inadvertently a wax fist, which Luffy begins to like swing back toward him. And Mr. 3 puts up a wax wall to defend himself, which probably, if Luffy had been just punching, just cold with his regular hand, that would have been enough. But because he is loaded up with the same material that the wall is made out of, that wall eventually cracks. And it's clear from Mr. 3's face, he was not expecting that shit to crack. Like, that doesn't happen. And so it looks like, all right, Luffy has done it. And he walks towards the candle set. And he stops dead and is just standing there. And they're like, hey, bud, what are you doing? Are you going to save us? Or what the fuck? And he says, no. And they're like, what? And he says, I don't feel like saving you. Guys, I swear to God, this was probably the most shocked by like a character's behavior I have been since watching this show. For Luffy to just because we don't know what's happening to him yet, right? And it's not even very clear in the animation that he is standing on a patch of paint. There's like a shadow there, but it could be anything, So him just saying, I don't feel like saving you, I truly, for a moment, was just like, oh my God, what is happening? I thought that maybe them yelling at him about destroying the pillar and like how he didn't do it, like maybe he was mad at them because they were being dicks to him about it or something. But like, that's not his personality. It's just, that's not something that he would get hung up on at all. So I just couldn't understand. And a second after he says, I don't want to, we get like the camera sort of zooms in on his face and we see his eyes and they're like weirdly drawn. His pupils look different than they normally do. It's like there's just white and then his pupil rather than a colored iris. And then all of a sudden it jumps over to Miss, what did you guys tell me it was? Miss Long Weekend? Miss Holiday Weekend? I can't remember. The one with the pigtails. And she just says, colors trap. And then like takes a bite of like a rice cracker. And then there's this long moment of the camera just going over the woods, over the candle set, over Luffy's foot standing on the paint, over her face again. And then there's sort of a weird fisheye lens on like effect on Luffy when we go back to him. And Golden Week. Thank you, Gus. So it becomes really clear that this is like some sort of psychic attack. And it turns out, because like I had said before, is her skill that she is able to paint these wax figures to look like the real people. At this point, it's a good explanation, but I'm not actually sure that's what the show intends. She has a whole different kind of ability. She can use colors to manipulate people's emotions by drawing certain symbols. And if they stand on them or if the symbol is drawn on their clothing, it completely changes the way that they feel about a given situation. So he has stepped onto a black symbol, which is meant to be about betrayal. So he's standing there and it's very clear, like, what she's able to do, it's not like it works entirely without any, like the person who has been affected by it, there is a sense that they know they're being affected somehow, but they can't necessarily break through it, either because they don't know what it is to try and break through it in the first place, or because her power is strong enough to override their awareness of it. But later on, she has the yellow, which is meant to make him laugh. And that one works for a little while. Then she uses red, which is meant to make him just attack the symbol itself that's painted on the ground, which I don't know why I found that one in particular so good, but there is something really undignified about. It's not like I thought when she said, you know, this is going to be like, you know, a bullfighter's red. I thought she meant I'm making you enraged so that you like get violent and fight your friends or fight anybody around you. But it's a lot more focused than that. It's just that symbol that he begins to like beat up, which I just find so funny. I mean, especially because Luffy, when he gets mad and decides to punch things, like he goes for it. So he's out here just like driving his fists into the ground. And then eventually that symbol on his back gets smeared because Sanji is being chased around by Mr. Five and they run into him. And then she does green, which is meant to be calming. And that is the one where they look up and he is sitting on the ground, like having a picnic with her, sipping a cup of tea and talking about what good tea it is. And it seems like this completely worked, but then Sanji spots him and is yelling at him like, what the fuck are you doing? Because he doesn't understand yet. And when the camera pans to Luffy's face, he is gritting his teeth and sweating and looks... he's still saying this tea is really good. Oh, Usopp. Thank you, Bernadette. Why do I keep doing that? But it's clear he's like fighting it. Or if not actually fighting it, he is aware it's being done to him and he's super pissed off about it. And this is what I mean when I say, like, this is a pretty good attack for somebody like Luffy. Because as Zoro says, he is very easy to manipulate already. You know, having a superpower that allows you to be better at manipulating him, you've already got such an advantage on that front. It's really not fair, you know? And it becomes pretty clear to me, at least, that I don't know if he would have been able to break out of any of these without help. I don't think he could have done it. It seems like he was just completely taken in. And every time that he manages to get out of it, it's because some like external force has messed up the symbol. The way he gets off of the black one is because Vivi very wisely realizes that he's going to try and do the opposite of anything you say. So she tells him to stay standing on it and don't move. And he just says no and steps off it, and that fixes it. And later on, Usopp sees him from the bushes and fires one of his little pellets at him. And that messes up the paint on his back again and pulls him out of it. So, yeah, he is just constantly being saved in this one instead of doing all the saving, which I have to admit is like a refreshing change. Because despite the fact that he has needed help a few times in the past, it's always been like he needed help to get brought back into play so that he could be the one, right? Like, especially with Arlong, for example. He gets dropped in the ocean and there's like 2 full episodes of them trying to get him out. Finally, they do. And then it's him versus Arlong completely. And here they get him out, and it's not like he doesn't go after Mr. 3 later and like kick him in the face, but it doesn't feel like he's the answer to all of their problems, you know? And I liked that. I thought that that was a nice change because it can get a little bit too repetitive, I think. So yeah, there's a series of different emotions that he is sent through. And while all of this is happening, Usopp is facing off with Mr. 5. I'll be honest, guys. The stuff between Usopp and 5 and then Miss Valentine, I found the least interesting. Just because Mr. 5, it's just, again, a lot of explosions and a lot of no results from those explosions. You know, it's not the same. If you're watching somebody try and punch a person and they miss, and they keep punching the wall or they punch the ground or they just swing through the air and they don't hit. Okay, there's fighting, but they're just not hitting their target. But with Mr. 5, he just keeps repeatedly hitting his target and it's just not doing anything. So eventually it just gets kind of boring to watch. And Usopp is like not a particularly adept dodger or fighter. And so him being like kind of paired up against this guy, it doesn't feel like a great pairing. Like Usopp versus Fish Lips, Duck Lips from the other arc. That was fantastic because Usopp is such a goon and Duck Lips guy clearly took himself very seriously. And so the two of them playing off of one another, they were excellent foils to each other. Mr. 5, it's like it's not like he doesn't take himself seriously, but he doesn't have that much personality about it. I felt like Duck Lips, there was a real vibe with him. He seemed like, you know, he looked like a Backstreet Boy. He had this sort of like vain, like vibe to him that it was very undignified to be fighting Usopp in the first place. Like you felt that he was really lowering himself. And Mr. 5, I just don't really get anything off of him. I don't feel like there's a lot of real character behind that. And I don't know if that's because he's supposed to be so cool that this renders him essentially without emotion, because that can be one of the dangers of making a character too chill. But yeah, I just didn't really like care as much about what was going on with them, except for the, you know, ways in which Usopp could dodge them and then become part of the rest of the story. And eventually, like I said, Usopp does he manages to get Luffy out of his green emotion state. And this is when Usopp, he's like, he comes up with a plan here because he starts noticing that the wax, that there's like a mist of it in the air after Mr. 5 uses a breath bomb. And that wax has melted as a result of this explosion, which gives him an idea. And he decides that he's going to have Karoo run around this like giant cake with essentially a rope, which he's going to use as a wick. And again, Karoo, there's a moment in the first episode where like Luffy comes out, Usopp is on Karoo's back and standing next to Luffy. And then he says something about like, all right, we're going to get in position. And then Karoo just runs backward like 100 feet. And at first I thought Usopp was going to be like, what are you doing, Karoo? I should have known better. He's like, okay, we're ready. I was like, oh my God, Usopp. And again, I like Karoo. I like you because you're cute, but you are so useless so much of the time. He winds up borderline redeeming himself by dragging this rope around this candle arrangement. Borderline. Meanwhile, like Luffy is fighting with his shirt off because he pulled the shirt off because it had the symbol on it and whatnot. And while they're all dealing with that, our friends have been completely covered in wax. They're totally covered, and I wasn't really sure how this was going to be handled because, like, obviously if this were real life, they would be suffocating, right? It's not like I couldn't tell if the cartoon was going to treat them like they would in life by being killed by wax. And they do and they don't. The melting does wind up saving them and they're fine underneath the wax. But Mr. 3 says something about how, like, it's too late already. They're probably writhing in pain inside, like underneath the wax. So the implication is that either they're being like suffocated or it's supposed to be like the heat of the wax hurts, you know, they're being burned by it. But regardless, it's like yeah, they're still alive under there. They're not trying to act like, oh, they instantly were killed. Like, of course not. But I couldn't tell exactly how much they were going to acknowledge what it would actually do to a human body. And they kind of do. And that was fine. That was enough for me. So, yeah, this plan that Usopp comes up with, I love this so much. He has Karoo running around and he's laying down this wick, essentially. And then the way that they light it is that Luffy winds up getting Mr. Three's flaming hair, and he uses that to light it, which is such a good idea. I really love this because his hair being on fire is genuinely wild. And I just I'm really into it. This whole thing is such a good setup, you know? And Luffy intended to just use the hair as to try and melt the whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. But Usopp has soaked this rope in oil and he yells about it to Luffy as he's dragging Mr. Three over, who, by the way, has made himself a full wax mech suit. I mean, honestly, why not? It never occurred to me, but if it's as strong as steel, that's actually a pretty good idea. I have to assume it's heavy as fuck, but he says it's he's being wrapped in velvet, which I love that they took the trouble to give, to tell us that, because that is not something that I feel like most people would consider that important, but it is the sort of thing that I wonder about because I just am like that. And so being told that for him, it's super cozy in here and I'm fine. I was like, all right, I really did kind of want to know. So thanks. So anyway, Luffy drags him over, uses his hair to light this wick. And then there is this fucking almost explosion, which isn't how it would go. But nevertheless, and Usopp, who's laying there, he's well within the sphere of what this fire is going to do. And just says he's just going to bear it, even though it's going to be really painful. The fire goes up, and this results in the melting of Mr. Three's mech armor. And then the whole display begins to melt. I have to mention the animation of Mr. Three running away after his mech suit gets melted is some of the funniest running ever on this show. And there have been some weird runs. But that one, there is something about it that made me think of the T-1000 in Terminator 2, because he's got his hands straight out and it's very mechanical somehow. But anyway, that shit was so funny to me. And long story short, everybody, gets out of there. Everybody is okay. It gets melted down. Miss Valentine is over on the side beating the shit out of Usopp. And she's gonna come at him with her, I think she says 10,000 kilogram guillotine. So I guess she's planning to land on him with her leg out and cut his head off somehow with that. And she gets got by the two girls, of course. And there is this moment, you guys, and I have to comment on this. First of all, again, Nami is in her bra. It doesn't look like anything much has happened to Vivi's clothes. They're a little tattered, but they're whole. They're right there. But they attack Miss Valentine. It seems like they take her out with no effort at all. Which, considering that she had made herself weigh 10,000 pounds, doesn't really make sense, but it doesn't matter. And there's this moment of the two of them being back to back with the fire behind them. And I think Nami says, that's hot. And I was like, okay, I get it. We don't have to. Come on, whatever. I was really kind of mystified at the fact, too, that Nami is the only one that anything happened to her clothes. And when they, like, pop out of the fire, we still aren't seeing what's happened to Zoro. Mr. Five is about to pull his gun and use his, like, breath bomb thing. And Usopp fires this thing at him. And he's like, you idiot, I've already done this. I've swallowed this before. You know this isn't going to affect me. It turns out that the bomb that he slingshotted was not an explosive one. It was a Tabasco bomb, which, despite that it's Tabasco, it still results in a flame. Like he's breathing fire like a dragon. It was really unclear to me what this was even meant to do. I don't know. I don't get it. But it's like stops him for a minute. And again, he gets very salty about the fact that, like, Usopp is essentially mocking him, grips him up, starts shaking him. And we have this, like, weird moment of the screen going completely black. I was so confused, guys. It goes black slowly enough that I almost thought something had happened to my television, because I don't feel like they have done the animation this way before. So I had a moment of, like, grabbing the remote, and I was about to, like, turn the TV off and on again, because our TV will act up occasionally. But no, what they're doing is they are making this dramatic entrance. This red circle opens up. There's flames. And then we see Zoro coming up behind him, and his swords are on fire. And later on, he says something like, flaming swords, not bad. That was actually kind of cool. And I was like, yeah, honestly. And he manages to take Mr. Five out with, like, zero effort. It's nothing. And we have this moment of him and his eyes and the flames licking around his face. And then when we see Mr. Five, he's, like, on fire briefly. And then Broggy is freed from the wax. So here we have the thing in the next episode that is really wild. Broggy gets up. He sees his friend who's on the ground and begins sobbing uncontrollably. And I should mention, while this is going on, there's this whole thing with Luffy, and he goes in the woods to chase Mr. 3, and Mr. 3 makes a bunch of, like, different dummies of himself, like decoys, and mocks Luffy for being really stupid, and that he won't ever be able to figure this out. But Luffy manages to zero in on which one is actually him immediately. So I don't really feel like talking about this too much, because it is so ineffective. And he asks Luffy, how did you know? And Luffy just says, a hunch. But I did really enjoy that, because his whole thing is like, you just move on instinct and it's not going to work because I'm super intellectual. And it turns out, like, no, actually, that might just still work, actually. But yeah, so Broggy is really, like, so bummed over his friend. He begins to cry uncontrollably, and it's like a river or a waterfall. And there's this weird implication initially that, like, his tears woke his friend back up. What we wind up finding out later is that he didn't get killed because his friend's axe is so dulled because of the hundreds of thousands of fights that they've had, that he just got knocked unconscious, but he didn't actually die. Which, I mean, fine. Like, I hate it, honestly, but fine, sure. I don't like any time that the consequences of something are completely made null and void. So I don't want you guys to think that I am mad that his friend is still alive, because you guys know from the last episode how, like, fucked up I thought this entire scenario was. So in a lot of ways, I'm glad, but it just feels like none of that actually wound up mattering at all, which I don't like. But what are you going to do? So what is his friend's name? It's Broggy, and is he Dory? That's not right, is it? But yeah, the two of them essentially decide that they're going to like sacrifice their fight on behalf of these new friends that they've made. This was sort of weird because I didn't understand why they were behaving as if they were going into certain death. Because it doesn't like, am I mistaking this? Is it like the two of them have this sort of mist coming off them? Broggy has a red mist and Dory has this blue mist. And is it supposed to be that this is like their life force that they're sort of putting forth to defeat this fish? I couldn't really understand, because there's just this attitude about the two of them that they're facing death, like they're about to sacrifice themselves. And yet they don't actually physically go and attack this fish. The mist coming up off of them is new. Like, I don't think we knew anything about this ability, right? And it's not explained. So I feel like I've missed something somewhere. Get it? I'm sorry. Sorry. But you get what I'm saying. But yeah, they decide to like, they tell Luffy and his friends as they're getting on the Going Merry and they're about to take off, promise us that you are going to keep going straight ahead no matter what happens. And Luffy is like, okay, sure. Like, of course, doesn't understand why. And as they are heading out, this huge, what looks like essentially like a giant goldfish appears. And it truly is like, what the fuck? Because it's got disturbingly human teeth. And this is one of those things that anytime somebody's describing a really scary monster, they will say that like they had teeth like daggers or teeth like needles. You know, they describe, nothing is scarier, in my opinion, than a creature that is not human, but has really human looking teeth. That is incredibly disturbing. I don't like it. So this thing doesn't look like it should be that threatening, other than its giant size, but its teeth really threw me off and I did not care for it. So of course, Nami is like, we've got to turn aside, turn the ship, we're about to get eaten. And thankfully Usopp is like, we told them we would keep going straight. And I'll tell you what, I had honestly already forgotten that they promised that. Like, I was just like, yeah, turn, what are you doing? And then he reminded me, I was like, oh, fuck, right, okay. This is what it was about. So they continue going forward and they're like in its mouth, like genuinely inside. They're like under its uvula. And then the two giants who are standing on the shore, they lift their weapons and swing them down. And this like force sort of comes out of them and drives through this fish, literally through it, and makes a giant tunnel directly in front of the Going Merry. For some reason, this does not destroy the ship at all. It only destroys the fish. And they manage to sail right through the like gaping hole in the center of this fish. And the last like frame of this episode is the fish with all of this water pouring through the hole in its head and the ship in midair with this like arc of water behind it. So yeah, that is how that ends. And I really liked it. I liked that there was like a final boss that we didn't know we needed to worry about. And it winds up not being an issue in the end because of these two giants. Like, I don't understand what they did or how they did it. But I do like the fact that they wind up being so crucial to them getting away, because it felt really easy. Oh, we need to stay for a year for the log pose to update. Oh, no, we don't. Now we have an eternal pose, and so we don't have to worry about it. I was like, okay, cool. But also, that's so convenient. And finding out that there was going to be a monster they were going to have to face, and they just wind up not having to. I felt like that helped it seem like there was more of an obstacle in the end. So I was fine with that. But yeah, so that's the end of the this trio of episodes. So next is we're going to start like a new season, basically. I don't know, last time it was really clear, okay, we've crossed into the Grand Line. And if we're at the end of this one, I don't know what the next phase is. Maybe Alabasta? Because that's where they're headed, but like, they're not just going to get there, right? Also, I'm surprised that the Grand Line feels like they're still in it. So the fact that this is the end of that season, I'm interested in why it's over when they're still in the Grand Line, as far as I understand it. Gus says, if you remember the stories that Usopp told Kaya in Syrup Village, one of them was about a huge goldfish that's poop is as big as islands. Also, Nanamonai Island, the island that Ms. All Sunday gave them an eternal pose to that Luffy crushed, is one of those poop islands. Oh, okay. And the Giants were talking about that and like reminiscing over it. I did forget about that, though. Thank you, Gus, for reminding me that Usopp tells that story. Oh, and I forgot to mention, too, real quick, that Karoo goes after Ms. Golden Week. And we don't see what happens, but evidently the like implication is that he beats the shit out of this little girl, which is hilarious. Like, it's just this giant duck beating up a little girl. Like, what? Fine. Sure. Why not? All right. So I'm going to wrap up, but thank you guys again so much for listening and hanging out with me. Thank you again, Bernadette, for commissioning this. I hope you guys are enjoying the coverage still, and I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.